Have you ever looked at a perfect family photo and wondered what dark secrets were hiding just beneath the surface? I was sitting at a table next to my 7-year-old grandson at my son's second wedding. It was supposed to be a day of celebration. Suddenly, the boy grabbed my hand, his fingers like ice, and whispered, "Grandma, we have to leave right now." I leaned in close and asked him, "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" He trembled, his eyes wide with fear, and
Grandma, didn't you look under the table?
I slowly lowered my gaze, and what I saw made my blood run cold. I took my grandson's hand, and we stood up in silence.
I'm so glad you're here with me. If you're watching this video, please do me a favor and hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know just how far this story has traveled. I was sitting in the middle of a grand wedding hall, a ballroom bathed in the soft glow of candlelight, right next to my little grandson, the boy I love more than life itself. Today was the wedding of my son, Michael, to his second wife, Clara. My little boy, Noah, was busy pushing his blue toy truck back and forth across the pristine white tablecloth. His bright, clear eyes seemed lost in a world of his own, a world where the noise of the adults around him couldn't reach. I looked at him, and my heart melted. I carefully adjusted the tiny bow tie at his neck, a gesture as gentle as if I were caressing the memory of his mother, Sarah, whose every warm smile I still remember as if it were yesterday. The soft, elegant melody of a string quartet filled the room, blending with the low murmur of conversations and the delicate clinking of champagne glasses. The ballroom was decorated with breathtaking luxury, with arrangements of immaculate white lilies on every table and the candlelight reflecting off the gleaming silverware. I looked up, searching for Michael. He was busy moving from table to table, raising his glass to thank the guests with a radiant smile that seemed to desperately want to hide the emptiness I knew he still carried in his heart since Sarah passed. In the distance, Clara, my son's new wife, was a vision in her pearl-beaded wedding dress, posing for photographs with her friends. Her smile was flawless, without a single cloud, as if the entire world belonged to her. I looked at her and felt a strange knot tighten in my chest, a bizarre sensation, but I tried to push it aside, telling myself I was just being overly sensitive. Waiters moved with practiced grace between the tables, refilling wine glasses, clearing empty plates, and arranging napkins. An elderly couple at our table turned to me with a kind smile. "How quickly Noah is growing up! How old is he now, Eleanor?" I smiled and replied in a soft voice, "He just turned 7. Time flies." Then, I turned to cut a small piece of wedding cake for Noah. The boy looked up, his eyes shining with gratitude, but he immediately lowered his head again and continued pushing his toy truck as if only that toy was a place where he felt safe. Suddenly, Noah stopped. His little hands froze on the truck, and his round, innocent eyes looked at me with a seriousness that was not normal for a child his age. I was a little startled. A cold premonition washed over me. He grabbed my hand tightly, his small fingers ice cold. In an urgent voice, he whispered, "Grandma, I want to leave right now." His voice trembled as if he were holding back a fear he couldn't possibly explain. My heart began to race. I leaned over him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "What's wrong, my boy? Tell me what it is." Noah shuddered, pressing his lips together tightly. And then he whispered so softly that I had to lean my ear closer just to hear him. "Grandma, you didn't look under the table, did you?" His words were like a shard of ice piercing my chest. A terrible anguish began to build inside me, making it difficult to breathe. I tried to remain calm and stroked his hair, but his gaze, the panicked look of a boy of just 7, made it impossible to ignore. "It's okay, my love, let your grandma look," I said, trying to make my voice sound calm and soothing, although I could feel my own heart pounding in my chest. Carefully, I lifted the edge of the pristine white tablecloth and peered into the dark space beneath the table, where the wooden legs of the chairs and Noah's little shoes were swinging back and forth. And then I saw it, a small piece of paper, folded in 4, lying there, right next to Noah's chair. It was so small that it was almost lost in the shadows, but its very presence chilled me to the bone. Noah huddled against me,
his small hand gripping my arm as if seeking refuge. I could feel his agitated breathing, every tremor seeming to scream that something was terribly wrong. I crouched down completely, and with a trembling hand, I picked up the paper. The people around us were still laughing and toasting, but in that instant, my entire world shrank until it was just me, Noah, and that cursed piece of paper in my hand. I unfolded it. The dim candlelight on the table was just enough to read the hastily scribbled words. Asterisk table 8. Add peanuts to the child's serving. Asterisk a few simple words, but they were like a direct punch to my heart. I felt the blood turn to ice in my veins, the air catching in my chest. Noah is severely allergic to peanuts, something my entire family knows perfectly well. A single peanut would be enough to put his life in grave danger. Who could have written this? Who could be so cruel as to do this on my son's wedding day? I squeezed Noah's hand, feeling his little fingers tremble in mine. I stood up abruptly, not caring about the surprised looks from the people around me. The elderly couple nearby stopped their conversation and looked at me with concern. I hugged Noah with all my strength, as if I feared he would vanish if I let him go. The laughter and the music continued, but for me, everything had descended into a heavy, suffocating silence. Memories of other times flooded my mind, pulling me out of that gleaming wedding hall and back to the years when our family was whole and happy. I once thought my son's home would always be filled with laughter, but life, like a sudden, violent gust of wind, extinguished that flame of happiness, leaving me with scars that would never truly heal. I remember Sarah, my first daughter-in-law, the way I remember the morning sunlight streaming through the window at dawn. Her smile was tender and warm, and she always made me feel like I was in the arms of a true daughter. Sarah never raised her voice, never did anything that caused me a moment's worry. She was one of those rare people who, just by looking at them, made you feel at peace. I still remember those breezy afternoons in the suburbs of Austin when I would arrive at Michael and Sarah's little house. The laughter of Noah, who had just begun to walk, would echo in the backyard as he chased after a brightly colored rubber ball. Sarah would be on the porch with a basket of freshly picked vegetables from her garden, smiling as she watched her son. "Mom, Eleanor, try this salsa I made. See what you think," she would often say to me, her voice full of pride as she placed a warm bowl in front of me. I would sit there, eating and talking with her about simple things, while Noah crawled on the floor, clinging to an old toy truck. But the most beautiful, and also the most painful, memory is the night Noah became terribly ill. He had a raging fever, his little body burning, and his eyes could barely open, with no strength left even to cry. Sarah held him while tears streamed silently down her cheeks. "Mom, Eleanor, I'm so scared," she whispered, her voice trembling. I sat next to her, taking turns placing damp cloths on his forehead, trying to calm her. "Don't worry, sweetheart. The boy is strong. He's going to be okay." But inside, the worry weighed on me like a heavy stone. I stayed up with Sarah until dawn, when the first rays of the sun appeared, and Noah's fever finally broke, and he fell asleep peacefully in his mother's arms. Sarah turned to me, her eyes red but with a faint, relieved smile. "Thank you, Mom. Without you, I don't know what I would have done." In that moment, I just took her hand and squeezed it tightly, as if I wanted to tell her that I would always be there for her and for Noah. I thought that this little family would be happy forever, like a song that never ends. But then, one fateful afternoon, everything shattered. The phone rang while I was washing dishes in my kitchen. The cold, impersonal voice of a police officer came through the line. "Mrs. Anderson, we regret to inform you that there has been an accident." I don't remember how I managed to hear the rest of the sentence. I just know that my hands were shaking so violently that I dropped a plate on the floor and it shattered into a million pieces. Sarah was gone in an instant when a truck that had lost control hit her car on the highway just outside the city. I stood there, paralyzed, feeling the world crumble around me. Sarah's funeral was on a day of torrential rain. The drops fell relentlessly, as if the sky itself was weeping for her. Noah, who was only 4 years old then, was in my arms, confused, looking at everyone with his innocent eyes, not understanding what was happening. "Grandma, where is my mommy?" he asked in his small, uncertain voice. I hugged him tightly, swallowing my own tears, and whispered, "Your mommy is in a very beautiful place, my love." But inside, I felt shattered. Michael, my son, collapsed in front of the coffin, his shoulders shaking, unable to say a single word. I knew he was trying to be strong, but his gaze was empty, as if a part of his soul had gone, with Sarah. After that tragedy, Michael changed completely. He threw himself into his work, leaving home before the sun rose and not returning until Noah was already fast asleep. I understood that he was running away, trying to fill that immense void in his heart with endless days of work. But Noah, my poor, sweet boy, suffered the most. He started talking less, and his gaze was often sad, as if he was waiting for a miracle that would bring his mother back. I became his only support. I took him to school every morning and sat by his bed every night to rock him to sleep. "Grandma, tell me a story about my mommy," he would often ask. And I would tell him, in a choked voice, about the time Sarah sang to him, how she would cut his fruit into tiny, star-shaped pieces to make his favorite dessert. Each story was an attempt to keep Sarah's memory alive in Noah's mind and in my own heart. Chloe, my adopted daughter, also became an essential part of those difficult days. With her warm heart and skilled hands, she would come to the house often, bringing coloring books or cookies she had baked herself. Chloe loved Noah as if he were her own little brother. She would carry him, teach him his letters, or sit for hours with him at the table, helping him with his clumsy drawings. "Look, Noah, your house turned out even prettier than mine," she would say, her laughter as clear as a bell. But sometimes I would catch Chloe looking at Michael when he would enter the house in silence after a long day of work. It was a deep look, one that held something more than simple sibling affection. I saw it, but I chose not to say anything. Perhaps I was afraid that if I brought up the subject, I would break the fragile stability of what was left of our family. Michael's house slowly became devoid of laughter. But thanks to Chloe and Noah, the family flame remained lit, even if it was just a flicker. I did everything I could to keep that flame from going out. But in the depths of my heart, I knew that both Michael and I were living with wounds that had never healed. Every time I saw Noah sleeping, I saw Sarah's features on his small face, and my heart would ache all over again. The memory of that afternoon is still as vivid in my mind as if no time has passed. I was sitting in my small living room, listening to the birds chirping in the garden, with a heart full of mixed emotions. It was the first time my son Michael was bringing Clara home to introduce her. I tried to open my heart, to see this young woman through the eyes of a mother who wants her son to find happiness again after so much pain. But deep down, I couldn't shake a feeling of unease, like a cold wind that made me shiver. That afternoon, Michael arrived later than usual. I was in the kitchen preparing the lasagna that Noah loves so much when I heard the door open. Michael came in with a strange glow on his face, his eyes shining the way they used to in his youth when he would talk about Sarah with a passion he couldn't hide. "Mom," he said, his voice choked with emotion, leaning against the doorframe, "I want you to meet someone." I stopped what I was doing and looked at him, feeling a wave of nervousness. "Someone special?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Michael smiled, a smile I hadn't seen in a very long time. "Yes, you're going to like her very much," he said, full of confidence. I nodded, wiping my hands on my apron, trying to hide the worry that was beginning to grow inside me. After Sarah, I wasn't sure anyone could fill the void she had left, not just for Michael, but for Noah and for me. That night, Clara appeared. She entered my house in an elegant turquoise dress, her hair perfectly styled in soft curls that framed her face, and her lips painted a soft pink that curved into a smile. That smile, I have to admit, was enchanting, as if she had rehearsed it to please anyone. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Anderson," she said in a sweet voice, bowing her head slightly. I returned her smile, invited her in, and served her a cup of hot, aromatic tea. "Your home is so cozy," Clara said, her eyes scanning the family photos on the wall, where there was one of Sarah hugging a very tiny Noah. I nodded and thanked her, but her eyes lingered on that photo longer than I would have liked, and I wasn't sure if I was comfortable with that. Dinner unfolded in an atmosphere that I tried to make as welcoming as possible. I placed the dishes I had spent all afternoon preparing on the table: lasagna with rich meat sauce, a fresh salad with avocado and mango, and garlic bread, Noah's favorite. Michael sat next to Clara, his eyes never leaving her. His happiness was evident in every gesture. "Mom, Clara works in marketing at my company. She's incredibly talented at what she does," he said, his voice brimming with pride. Clara smiled and served me a slice of lasagna with a delicate but calculated movement. "Mrs. Anderson, this is delicious. You have to teach me how to make it," she said, giving me a friendly look. I smiled and replied politely, but a small part of me remained on edge. There was something about the way she spoke, the way she laughed, that made me feel like I was watching a very well-rehearsed play. Noah, my grandson, was sitting at the head of the table, unusually quiet. He, who normally never stopped talking about school, just picked at his food that night without once lifting his head. I noticed he was avoiding Clara's gaze, as if he were trying to retreat into a safe corner. Clara leaned over, took a candy bar from her purse, and placed it in front of Noah with a radiant smile. "This is for you. It's very good, Noah," she said in a voice as sweet as honey, as if she were trying to win him over. But Noah remained still, his little hands clutching his fork, and then he simply turned his head away without touching the chocolate. I saw a flash of fear in his eyes and felt my heart clench. Michael frowned, about to scold his son. "Noah, what's wrong with you? Clara is giving you some candy." I quickly intervened. "It's nothing. He's probably just a little tired. Leave him be, son." Michael sighed but didn't say anything more and turned to pour Clara more wine, as if wanting to lighten the mood. Chloe, my adopted daughter, was also at dinner. She sat across from me, eating in silence, but I noticed how her gaze darkened when Clara took Michael's hand under the table. Chloe has always been a very sensitive girl, and I know she loves Michael like a brother, but sometimes I wonder if that feeling doesn't run deeper. When Clara took Michael's hand, Chloe's hand froze over her glass, and I saw her fingers tighten slightly. She didn't say anything. She just lowered her head and continued eating. But that silence was heavier than any words. I wanted to ask her, to understand what was making her sad, but I knew it wasn't the right time. After dinner, Clara insisted on washing the dishes, even though I protested several times. "Mrs. Anderson, let me. You rest," she said with an almost overwhelming enthusiasm. I reluctantly agreed and watched her go into the kitchen, roll up her sleeves, and hum a cheerful tune while she cleaned. I have to admit, she did everything impeccably. The dishes were neatly stacked, and the sink was sparkling. For a moment I thought, asterisk, this girl seems very thoughtful, asterisk. But then, when I went back into the living room, I saw Noah sitting on the floor coloring, his little hands clutching a crayon. Clara approached and sat down next to him, praising him. "You draw so well, Noah. What is it?" "Let me see." But Noah immediately dropped the crayon and leaned back with an expression of distrust, as if she were a threat. Clara glanced at me and quickly forced a smile, as if to cover up the awkward moment. "What a shy boy," she said in the same sweet voice. But I saw something strange flash in her eyes. Michael, meanwhile, didn't seem to notice anything unusual. He was busy pouring more wine, telling funny anecdotes from work, and laughing loudly every time Clara told a joke. The introduction ended with my son completely content, seeing Clara off at the door, his eyes fixed on her as if there were no one else in the world. I stood there, watching them walk away, with a strange feeling in my heart, as if something wasn't quite right. Time passed, and Clara gradually became a part of our lives. One weekend morning, with the bright Texas sun flooding the living room through the windows, I was knitting a scarf when Clara appeared, smiling from ear to ear. "Mrs. Anderson, I want to take Noah to the park today. Is that all right?" she asked, her voice full of enthusiasm. I looked at Noah, who was on the floor playing with his wooden blocks, his face expressionless. "Of course, I'm sure he'd love that," I replied, forcing a smile. Even though I felt a flicker of doubt, Michael was at work, and I thought perhaps a little fresh air would do Noah good. Clara took Noah's hand and led him toward the door while I watched them go with a strange heaviness in my heart. When they returned, Clara came in with a triumphant smile. "He had so much fun. He wouldn't stop going down the slide, and he even asked for another ice cream," she recounted, her voice brimming with excitement. But when I looked at Noah, I saw that his shirt was stained with dried mud on the blue fabric that I had ironed myself that morning. He was silent, his toy truck in his hand, without saying a word about his outing. "Did you have fun, my boy?" I asked, crouching down to stroke his hair. He just nodded slightly, looking away. I wanted to ask him more, to know why he was so quiet, but Clara intervened with her ever-sweet voice. "I already told you, Mrs. Anderson. He loved it." I nodded, but inside me a small piece of the puzzle of doubt began to form. On another occasion, while Michael was at work, Clara showed up unannounced. I was in the kitchen preparing a stew for lunch when I heard her talking to Noah in the living room. At first, her voice was soft, but suddenly I heard a harsh phrase. "Stay still, Noah. Don't make a mess. You're a big boy now, but you still act like a baby." I stopped dead in my tracks, my hand still over the onion I was chopping, and a chill ran through my body. I came out of the kitchen, and instantly, Clara changed her tone, becoming as sweet as if nothing had happened. "Our Noah is so clever. Look at the tall tower he built," she said, pointing to the wooden blocks the boy was playing with, a radiant smile on her face. But Noah just pressed his lips together and looked at me as if asking for help. I tried to smile and said, "Yes, he's very skilled." But inside, the unease was starting to grow, like a small thorn digging into my heart. I tried to calm myself. Surely she's just not used to children. Anyone is a bit clumsy at first. Noah's 7th birthday is a memory I will never forget. Chloe, my adopted daughter, spent the entire morning baking a chocolate cake, Noah's favorite. When she arrived with the cake and placed it on the table with its candles lit, Noah shouted with joy, his eyes lighting up for the first time in months. "Aunt Chloe, this is my favorite cake," he exclaimed, running to hug her. She smiled, stroked his hair, and told him tenderly, "I made it just for you, my love. Eat a lot." I watched them with a warm heart, feeling that the family flame was rekindling. Clara was also there, but she only clapped in a forced, mechanical way, standing in a corner with a weary smile. Her only gift for Noah was an indifferent pat on the shoulder and a perfunctory, "Happy birthday, champ." I saw how Noah shrank a little, avoiding her gaze, and my heart ached again. I wanted to say something, but I remained quiet, telling myself not to get too involved. Another time, Michael took Clara and Noah to the grocery store. I stayed home, but when they returned, I heard Clara complaining in an irritated tone. "Noah dropped a whole bag of candy at the checkout, and I had to pay for it. What a clumsy boy." Michael frowned and turned to scold his son. "Noah, you're a big boy now. You have to be more careful." I saw Noah lower his head, his hands intertwined, and his eyes sought mine as if asking for help. I quickly approached and put a hand on his shoulder. "Don't worry, my boy. It was just some candy." But inside, I couldn't stop wondering why Clara got so angry so easily with a child. Why couldn't she be as gentle as Sarah had been? One afternoon, when I went to pick up Noah from school, his teacher took me aside and said in a low but concerned voice, "Mrs. Anderson, lately Noah has been talking less and seems very withdrawn. Is something happening at home?" I froze but tried to downplay it. "I'm sure it's just the changes, Mrs. Davis, don't worry." But on the way home, Noah tugged on my blouse and said in a trembling voice, "Grandma, I don't want to go home with Miss Clara." I stopped and knelt down to look into his clear eyes, my heart feeling squeezed. "Why do you say that, my love?" "Miss Clara loves you," I said. But as soon as the words left my mouth, I knew I was wrong. Noah shook his head with firm determination in his gaze. "No, Grandma, she doesn't love me." I stroked his hair, trying to calm him, but inside, I couldn't deny that the boy was telling the truth. Chloe, who was nearby, had heard everything. She turned away in silence, but I saw how her shoulders moved slightly, as if she were holding back a sigh. All those loose pieces, all those little signs. I had seen them, but I had chosen to ignore them. And so, the day of my son's wedding arrived. That afternoon, the golden Florida sun streamed through the large windows, bathing the ballroom in a radiant light, as if wanting to celebrate my son's happy day. I was sitting at table number 8, next to my grandson Noah, and Chloe, my adopted daughter. Noah was playing with his blue toy truck, whispering a soft, vroom, vroom. I looked at him, and my heart filled with tenderness. Chloe, in a simple beige dress, was sitting on the other side, leaning over from time to say something in Noah's ear with a smile as sweet as the morning sundae. "Eat another little piece of bread, my boy," she said, breaking off a small piece for him. I smiled at the sight, feeling a little comfort in my heart. Although our family had gone through so much pain, the presence of Chloe and Noah was always the fire that warmed my soul. Michael, my son, dressed in an elegant navy blue suit, was walking between the tables, toasting with relatives. His face was overflowing with happiness, his radiant smile seeming to want to erase the dark years that followed Sarah's death. I looked at him, feeling a mix of pride and sadness. I wanted to believe that he had found a new happiness, that Clara, the dazzling bride in her pearl-beaded wedding dress, would give him a new home. But every time my gaze met Clara's, who was laughing loudly in front of the cameras, never letting go of her wine glass, I felt a small thorn digging into my heart. Her smile was too perfect, like a carefully placed mask. The soft melody of the string quartet played, blending with the lively conversations of the guests. The waiters moved discreetly, serving appetizers, crispy crackers, an aromatic cheese dip, and plates of fresh shrimp, elegantly decorated. I noticed that Noah only took a cracker and then carefully pushed the shrimp plate away. I frowned and asked him in a low voice, "Don't you like this, my love?" The boy shook his head, looking away as if he were hiding something. I wanted to ask him more, but a close relative interrupted, saying cheerfully, "And Noah is behaving so well, Eleanor. Look how big he's gotten." I smiled and replied, "He's a smart little man now." But inside, I couldn't help but worry. Noah had never refused food in such a strange way. In the distance, I saw Clara's gaze turn to our table. The smile on her lips seemed to tighten for a second, just enough for no one to notice, before she turned to continue toasting with another guest. I tried to dismiss my uneasiness, telling myself I was overthinking. But then, everything changed in an instant. Noah, who was still playing with his toy truck, pushed it a little too hard, and the toy rolled off the table and onto the floor. The boy quickly crouched down to pick it up, but I saw him freeze, his eyes wide, fixed on something under the table. I leaned over to ask him what was wrong when Noah pulled out a small piece of paper, folded in 4, with trembling hands and a pale face. He immediately clung to my hand and whispered urgently, "Grandma, let's go. Please, let's go now." My heart started pounding as if it wanted to jump out of my chest. "What's wrong, my boy?" I asked, trying to stay calm, but Noah's panicked look made it impossible. Trembling, he repeated the question that chilled my blood. "You didn't look under the table, did you?" His words were like a cold knife that paralyzed me. I crouched down, lifted the white tablecloth, and my eyes scanned the dark space under the table. The little paper was lying next to his chair, a harmless-looking object, but it radiated menace. I picked it up with trembling hands, feeling the world shrink around me, leaving only Noah, me, and that cursed piece of paper. I unfolded it. The candlelight was just enough to read the scribbled words. Asterisk table 8, add peanuts to the child's serving. Asterisk a few words, but they were like an electric shock that ran through my entire body. I subconsciously crumpled the paper in my hand. The music, the laughter, everything around me seemed to sink into an abyss from which I couldn't escape. Clara, in her dazzling wedding dress, continued to laugh in a corner of the ballroom, raising her glass to toast with a guest, as if nothing in the world could worry her. Michael was busy taking photos with his coworkers, a radiant smile on his face that seemed to confirm this was the happiest day of his life. But for me, everything in that ballroom was a farce, a curtain that hid the terrible truth I had just discovered. I squeezed the paper tightly, feeling it burn my skin. Noah, the grandson I loved more than my own life, had almost become the victim of an evil plot, right on his father's wedding day. I turned to Chloe, my adopted daughter, who was sitting next to Noah. Her eyes were filled with concern when she saw my expression. "Take care of Noah, please," I said, trying to stay calm, though I couldn't hide the tremor in my voice. Chloe nodded, pulling Noah closer to her and hugging him tightly like a protective shield. "Where are you going?" she asked me in a low voice, her tone laced with anguish. I just shook my head without answering because I didn't even know what I was going to do next. I quickly went out into the hallway, my legs heavy as if they were made of lead. But my heart was pounding, urging me to act. Near the bar, I saw a group of waiters chatting. Their laughter sounded like a painful contrast to the storm that was raging inside me. I recognized Daniel, the young man who had brought food to our table several times. He had a kind face and a friendly smile, but at that moment, I couldn't think about that. I walked straight up to him, held the paper in front of his face, and asked in a firm voice, "Do you know who sent this paper?" Daniel looked at the paper, and his face changed instantly. His carefree smile vanished, replaced by an expression of panic. "My God, this is my paper," he stammered, his hands trembling as if he wanted to snatch it from me. "A woman gave it to me, and I accidentally dropped it when I was carrying the tray." His words were like a ray of light in the midst of the confusion, but they also agitated me even more. "Who gave it to you?" I insisted, almost shouting, completely losing my composure. Daniel took a step back, confused. "I don't know her name, ma'am. She just told me to give it to the chef." The paper didn't say who sent it. Rage exploded inside me like a burning fire. "All the more reason," I said, getting closer, my voice trembling with anger and fear. "You know, my grandson is severely allergic to peanuts. A single piece could kill him." Daniel turned pale, his eyes wide with horror, and he shook his head frantically. "Ma'am, I truly didn't know. I just followed the note. I had no idea about anything." His voice broke, as if he, too, was trapped in this nightmare. The other waiters began to whisper among themselves, looking at each other with curiosity and concern. I squeezed the paper in my hand, feeling it burn my skin. I wanted to scream, to break everything, but I knew I couldn't let my emotions get the better of me. Noah was waiting for me, and I had to protect him. From inside the ballroom, the MC's cheerful voice announced that they should prepare for the main course. His voice was like a cruel reminder that time was running out, and if I hesitated, a deadly trap could be waiting for Noah. I took a deep breath, trying to control the trembling in my body. I knew I couldn't remain silent. If I didn't act right now, I would never forgive myself. I returned to the ballroom with the paper still clutched in my hand, irrefutable proof of a sinister plot. The ballroom was still bathed in the soft glow of candlelight, and the music of the string quartet blended with the laughter of the guests. The waiters moved silently, serving the main courses, and the aroma of roasted chicken and savory gravy filled the air. But for me, everything was a farce. I looked at Noah, huddled next to Chloe, his clear eyes filled with fear, fixed on me as if I were his only refuge in the middle of the storm. I took Noah's small hand, feeling his trembling fingers in my palm, and then, as if driven by an invisible force, I stood up abruptly, my voice resonating clearly and firmly above the music and conversations. "One moment, please. Before we begin to eat, I have something to clarify." The entire ballroom fell silent, as if time had stopped. All eyes were on table 8, where I stood with Noah by my side, and Chloe sitting with a spark of determination in her eyes. The clinking of glasses ceased, the murmurs died down, and I could only hear the frantic pounding of my own heart. I held up the paper, the scribbled words an undeniable accusation. Who wrote this paper, asking for peanuts to be added to the food of the child at table 8? I asked, my voice trembling with indignation but forced to be clear and sharp. Whispers began to ripple through the room like small waves in a calm lake. Some guests looked at each other, shaking their heads with looks of curiosity and confusion. I felt Noah's gaze fixed on me, as if he were begging me to do something to protect him. Michael ran from another table, the smile on his face quickly fading to concern when he saw my expression. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked, completely bewildered. I didn't answer him immediately. I just placed the paper on the table and pushed it toward him. "Read it yourself," I said in a harsh voice, though inside I was a wreck. Michael took the paper, his eyes scanning the words, and I saw his face turn pale, his hands trembling slightly. "What does this mean?" he asked, stunned, looking at me and then at Noah as if searching for a logical explanation. Clara, in her dazzling wedding dress, approached, frowning with a perfectly feigned surprise. "What is all this, some kind of bad joke?" she said in a soft voice, but I noticed a flash of panic in her eyes. I looked at her directly, my heart gripped by anger and fear. "My grandson is allergic to peanuts," I said, my voice trembling with indignation. "This is not a joke. This is an attempt at murder." My words fell like a thunderclap, plunging the ballroom into a deathly silence. Some guests' mouths dropped open in astonishment, while others began to whisper, their eyes moving from me to Clara. Clara let out a forced laugh, a mask to maintain her composure. "Excuse me, Mrs. Anderson, but there is no name on that paper. Are you going to believe a story that a child who found it made up?" she said with a mocking tone, trying to paint me as a paranoid old woman. Some guests began to comment doubtfully, "Maybe it's a misunderstanding. Who would do something like that at a wedding?" The blood boiled in my veins. Clara's audacity left me almost speechless. I wanted to scream, to rip off that wedding dress to reveal the truth, but I knew I had to remain calm. For Noah, for my family. Suddenly, Chloe stood up, hugging Noah tightly, her eyes reddened and fixed on Clara. "That's enough, Clara." Her voice sounded cold but full of pain, as if she couldn't contain herself any longer. Chloe stepped forward and slapped her, a resounding smack that echoed throughout the ballroom. The dry, sharp sound broke the silence and the falsehood. Everyone froze, including me. Clara put a hand to her cheek, her eyes wide with shock, and then turned to Michael, sobbing. "You see, she's crazy with jealousy, and that's why she's attacking me. What have I done to deserve this?" Chloe didn't back down, her fists clenched, her voice broken with rage. "The only wicked person here is you. You wanted to harm an innocent child at your own wedding." Her words were like a knife that cut through the heavy air of the ballroom. The looks of doubt began to center on Clara, and I saw her freeze, her false smile faltering. Michael was motionless, his gaze shifting from me to Chloe and Clara, as if he were trapped between two worlds. "Chloe, calm down," he said in a trembling voice, but I knew he was no longer sure who to believe. The murmurs of the guests grew like a tide, carrying all eyes toward me, toward Clara, and toward Noah, my little grandson, who was trembling in Chloe's arms. Clara tried to maintain her false composure, but I saw her hands shake when she spoke. "This is slander. I'm sure someone put that paper there to ruin our wedding." Her voice was sharp, but I noticed the panic in her eyes, as if her perfect mask was beginning to crack. I couldn't stand her audacity any longer. The anger inside me exploded like a fire that consumed all my patience. I slammed my hand on the table, making the glasses tremble. "That's enough," I shouted in a voice so cold that it silenced even the string quartet. "Daniel, come here." The young waiter, Daniel, approached from a corner, his face pale with fear. His eyes darted from side to side as if he were trapped between the truth and the storm that was about to unfold. I showed him the paper, my voice trembling but firm. "Confirm it. Is this the paper you received?" Daniel nodded repeatedly, stammering, "Yes, ma'am, it is. A woman from the other table gave it to me, and I accidentally dropped it when I was carrying the tray." He lowered his head, as if wanting to avoid my gaze. I felt my blood boil, but I forced myself to remain calm because I knew everyone in the ballroom was watching. Clara hurried to interrupt in a sharp, almost desperate voice. "You're mistaken. I don't know anything about that." But before she could respond, a weak voice, full of pain, was heard from behind. Isabella, Clara's younger sister, burst into tears and stood up from her chair. "It was my sister Clara who gave me that paper," the young woman said, trembling as tears ran down her cheeks. "She asked me to give it to the waiter. I swear I didn't know what was inside." A murmur of astonishment ran through the ballroom. "My God, I can't believe it. How is that possible?" I looked at Isabella, and my heart softened. She was barely 18 years old, her eyes red and full of confusion, as if she too was trapped in this nightmare. Clara turned abruptly and yelled at her sister, her face contorted with anger. "Shut up, Isabella! How dare you make up lies to harm your own sister?" Her voice was sharp, but I saw her lips tremble, as if she were struggling to hide the truth. Isabella backed away, trembling from head to foot, and said between sobs, "I'm not lying, sister. I just did what you asked." Her words were like a dagger that pierced through Clara's falsehood, leaving the entire ballroom in a state of shock. A close older relative shook his head, his voice choked. "How is it possible to not even spare an innocent child?" In the midst of the chaos, Chloe stepped forward, hugging Noah tightly, and said in an icy voice, "If you keep denying it, we can ask to check the security cameras in the ballroom. Everything will be cleared up in a moment." Her words were like a stone thrown into a lake, causing waves of panic. Clara's face turned ashen, her lips tightened, and her gaze desperately sought an escape. But there was no escape now. She didn't say another word, and that silence, for me, was the clearest confession of all. Michael froze, his hand trembling on Noah's shoulder, looking in horror at the woman he had just called his wife, Clara. His voice broke as if he were trying to cling to the hope that it was all a misunderstanding. But his gaze, moving from the paper to Noah, said it all. I saw how his heart broke, just as mine had when I discovered the plot. An uncle stood up and shook his head, disgusted. "It's unbelievable. Such wickedness on a day of celebration." His voice trembled as if he were holding back his indignation. After Chloe's challenge about the security cameras, a deadly silence descended upon the ballroom. Clara, the woman I had once tried to accept as part of my family, stood there, her face pale and her lips pressed together, searching for one last excuse. But the truth had been exposed, and she had nowhere left to run. Michael, my son, walked slowly toward her, his face tense and his eyes red, and asked, "Clara, tell me the truth. Is it true?" His voice trembled as if he were begging for a glimmer of hope that it was all a terrible mistake. But I knew that deep down, he also felt the painful truth. Clara took a step back, trying to force a twisted smile, but her eyes betrayed her panic. "You don't believe me?" she said in a broken voice, as if trying to cling to the last shred of Michael's trust. "It's all their plan. I didn't do anything." But her words sounded weak, like a whisper in a storm. I looked at her, my heart heavy with indignation and pain. This woman, whom I thought would bring my son happiness, was now standing before me like a stranger, a danger I hadn't seen coming. Chloe, my adopted daughter, put a hand on Michael's shoulder and said in a voice she was holding back with all her might, "Noah almost died because of this woman." Her words were as sharp as a knife. Clara yelled desperately, "Shut up! You're just a jealous intruder!" But Chloe didn't move. She was trembling with rage, but stood firm like a shield for Noah. "How dare you call me jealous?" Chloe responded in an icy voice. "Look this child in the eyes and tell me you didn't try to hurt him." Noah clung to me, his small hands squeezing mine as if he feared being dragged into this nightmare. The guests began to stand up, the festive atmosphere completely shattered. A relative of our family, Mr. Peterson, slammed his hand on the table with anger. "This is a disgrace. We can't let this go." Murmurs of support rose like a tide, drowning Clara in. Everyone's looks of contempt. Michael, trapped between the truth and his love, cried out, his voice broken with pain and indignation, "Noah is my son. You tried to kill my son at our own wedding." His words were like a direct stab to Clara's heart, and I saw her burst into tears. But those tears, I knew were not of repentance, but of being discovered. I placed the paper on the table and declared in a firm voice, "Anyone who tries to harm my grandson will never have the right to set foot in this family." My words resonated, clear and unyielding, like a final sentence. Clara looked up, her eyes full of fire, but I saw defeat in her gaze. She had lost, not only to me, but to the truth. The hotel security personnel approached and, in a polite but firm manner, asked Clara to leave the ballroom. "Ma'am, please come with us," one of them said in a cold voice. Clara backed away, looking for help, but no one sided with her. Many guests shook their heads, leaving their half-empty glasses and sighing with resignation. "Unbelievable," one whispered. "How can someone be so cruel?" Another said, horrified. Michael stood motionless, his hands on his head as if trying to keep his world from collapsing. Then, as if he no longer had the strength to stand, he slowly knelt in front of Noah, his voice choked. "Son, forgive me. Forgive me, my boy, for not protecting you." I saw tears stream down his cheeks, and I felt my heart break in two. I helped Michael get up, squeezing his shoulders, and said in a grave but confident voice, "Luckily, we stopped it in time. This false happiness has to end here and now." I looked at Clara, who was being escorted out amidst looks of contempt, and in my heart, I knew that she never was and never would be a part of this family. In the days that followed that nightmare of a wedding, my family was caught in a silent whirlwind where the wounds were still fresh and unanswered questions hung in the air. I felt as if I had just woken up from a bad dream in which I had almost lost Noah, my grandson, whom I love more than life itself. The story of the failed wedding spread like wildfire, from the quiet suburban streets to the conversations of distant relatives. The house phone rang off the hook. Some blamed Michael for blindly trusting Clara. Others sympathized with Noah, the innocent child who had almost been the victim of a malicious plot. But for me, every call was just a painful reminder of what we had endured. Michael became withdrawn after what happened. He was no longer the radiant man in the navy blue suit from the wedding day. Instead, he would take Noah to and from school in silence, his gaze filled with pain and guilt. The name Clara, like a curse, was never mentioned in the house again. I looked at Michael with an aching heart, but I knew he needed time to heal, to find himself after being betrayed by the person he loved. I didn't blame him because I understand that love can be blinding, but I also knew that our family had to rise from the ashes. I continued to care for Noah as I had since Sarah's passing. I cooked his favorite dishes, like macaroni and cheese or a soft vanilla pudding, trying to restore a sense of security in his young life. But the person who truly healed Noah's soul was not me, but Chloe, my adopted daughter. Every morning, she would carefully prepare his lunch for school, meticulously choosing foods without peanuts or anything that could put him in danger. She would even write a little note for the teacher explaining Noah's allergy, along with a smiling face drawn with a crayon, which he loved. "Aunt Chloe, you draw so well," Noah would exclaim when he opened his lunchbox, and I would see his eyes light up as if a part of his innocence had returned. Every afternoon, Chloe would take Noah to the nearby park. I used to watch them from a distance, seeing how she taught him to fly a kite, showing him how to hold the string so it would soar high. Once, Noah fell off the slide, and Chloe ran to him, picked him up, brushed the dust off his clothes, and whispered, "It's okay, my love. I'm here." Noah's clear laughter echoed, a sound I thought I had lost forever, and which was now like a balm for my heart. I looked at Chloe with infinite gratitude, because she was not only like a sister to him, but also like a second mother, filling the void that Sarah had left. One night, when Noah had a high fever, I saw Chloe spend the entire night by his side. She sat on a chair next to his bed, placing damp cloths on his forehead while she quietly told him the story of a brave little bird that flew through a storm. I stood at the door, watching in silence, and I realized that Michael's gaze followed Chloe for a long time. It was a complex look, full of gratitude and remorse, as if he was realizing something he had ignored for a long time. I didn't say anything. I just retreated in silence, giving them their space. But in my heart, I began to hope that maybe there was a light at the end of our family's dark tunnel. One night, during one of the rare dinners where we were all sitting together around the table with the warm pasta I had prepared, Noah suddenly looked up, his clear eyes fixed on Chloe. "I want Aunt Chloe to be my mommy," he said in a soft but clear voice, as if it were something he had been thinking about for a long time. Everyone at the table fell silent. Chloe blushed and lowered her head, gripping her spoon as if to hide her embarrassment. Michael froze, his eyes welling up with tears, as if Noah's words had touched a very deep chord in his heart. I smiled. I put my hand on Michael's shoulder and said in a warm voice, "True happiness, son, doesn't come from a dazzling wedding dress, but from a sincere heart that knows how to love." Michael looked at me, then at Chloe, and I saw a small spark of hope shine in his eyes. Time passed, and Clara disappeared completely from our lives, like a toxic wind that had finally passed. Noah became a happy boy again, always clinging to Chloe with his blue toy truck and the drawings she made for him. I saw him running and playing in the garden, feeling a great sense of relief, but also a pang of pain, thinking about everything he had had to endure. One day, Michael took Chloe's hand. He stood in front of me in the living room and said in a trembling but firm voice, "Mom, I know I made a mistake. I was blind. I put Noah in danger. But this time, I don't want to let go of the person who has truly been by our family's side." Chloe lowered her head, her cheeks flushed, but I saw a radiant smile on her lips. I nodded as tears silently rolled down my cheeks. "Son, the only thing I want is for you and Noah to be happy," I said in a choked voice. That night, after Noah had fallen asleep, I sat by the window, watching the silver moon that stretched over the quiet street. Its soft light was like a reminder that although our family had gone through dark days, light always finds a way to break through. I whispered to myself, family isn't always made of blood ties. Sometimes it's chosen with love and courage. After that grim wedding, a new chapter, full of light, had truly begun for my family. I looked toward the garden, where the kite that Chloe and Noah had flown the day before was still lying. And I knew that although the old wounds might never fully heal, we would continue on together, with love and strength as our support. After going through all of this, I understood something very important, that in life, there are losses that cannot be replaced, betrayals that break the heart, but sincere love will always be the light that illuminates the path. Family is not only built with blood ties, but also with choices, with the courage to protect each other from darkness and danger. It is sacrifice and true affection that bring lasting happiness, not false appearances. I want everyone who is listening to remember, you have to let your heart guide you, because sometimes a small gesture of attention can save a life, and it is kindness that gets us through nights that seem to have no end. The story you have just heard has been modified in names and places to protect the identity of the people involved. We do not tell this to judge, but with the hope that someone will listen and stop to reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence inside their own homes? I truly wonder, if you were in my place, what would you have done? Would you have chosen silence to maintain peace? Or would you have dared to face everything to reclaim your voice? I would love to know your opinion, so please share it with me in the comments. Every story can become a candle that lights the way for others. God always blesses us, and I am sure that courage will lead us to better days. Meanwhile, on the final screen, I will leave you with two of the channel's most beloved stories. I am sure you will be surprised. Thank you so much for staying with me. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a story.